To kick off the show, I have two sponsors I need to shout out. The first one is Wine Cats, two beautiful women in Vegas doing curated wine experiences. Add them on Instagram at WineCatsMeow to find out about their upcoming events. They have one coming up October 25th, but it's sold out already, so follow them to find out when their next curated experience is. I've been, and it's an amazing experience that you don't want to miss. The next sponsor is New Vintage Boutique by Tristan Mays. At Tristan Mays on Instagram. Handcrafted charcuterie boards, home decor, art, vintage, preloved clothing, and more. Check her out at newvintageboutique.com and add her on Instagram at Tristan Mays. I'm C1.
And I'm C2.
And this is
The Christopher Show.
Hey, this is Christopher Glennon, aka C2, and if you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, give me a call at 619-368-5550. I work at Kearny Mesa Dodge Jeep and Ram and have access to over 500 new vehicles as well as over 600 used. I look forward to hearing from you.
We've seen more video about Israel than we've seen about Ukraine, and Ukraine has been in a war for what, a year and a half now?
Yeah.
So it's not to say that Ukraine's not at war, but we've sent them $100 billion, I don't know, $60, $70 billion, and then I saw Chuck Schumer and Lindsey Graham talking about sending them another $70 billion over the next year. So there's a lot happening in the world today in terms of war. And with that, I know that, do you believe in the Second Amendment?
Of course I do.
And you believe in the right to bear arms?
Bear arms against your military when they decide that they want to invade your rights as a civilian.
So it's against terrorism, whether it's foreign or domestic. And it's not to say that we're going to attack each other or whatever, but our government keeps talking about taking away AR-15s. They're like, you don't need military-style guns. You don't need AR-15s. You don't need this. But then you see something like what just happened in Israel, and you hope that the citizens have guns to protect themselves, because that was an invasion, straight up an invasion. And the thing in Ukraine was an invasion. They were both invasions. And as soon as Ukraine happened, what happened? The government started going, oh, shit, we got to get guns in people's hands.
Yep.
So we talk about the Second Amendment and the attack on the Second Amendment. Biden just came up with an office. Have you heard about that?
Not really.
It's called the Office of Gun Control or something to that effect. But it's talking about making AR-15s banned. It's working on getting AR-15s banned. It says the average citizen doesn't need an AR-15. I think too often, we were talking about on the last show about balancing each other out, liberals and conservatives and things in that. I think sometimes people live in too utopian of a society, whether it's liberals or conservatives, where they think that we've gotten past the age of citizens needing guns to protect themselves. History has happened and has shown time and again that revolutions happen, that governments become corrupt. What was it? I think John F. Kennedy said something about the government being neither omniscient nor omnipotent. And so they're not omniscient, they're not omnipotent, but they damn sure act like they are some days by trying to set down all of these rules and go, hey, we're working toward a utopian society. Well, we're not there, bro.
Yeah.
So I've heard some people that are talking about taking up. Do you remember that urban training class that we took?
I do remember that vaguely, yeah. It was fun to take, but it was definitely informative as well.
It was fun to take, but what it showed me is I'd be taken out really fucking fast. It doesn't matter what kind of training you get if you're a civilian and you haven't trained as a soldier. So we still need our soldiers, but we also need civilians to be ready to take up arms. And I say this, I mean, we have an anti-gun culture in the cities just because, and it doesn't mean that everybody's anti-gun, because obviously there are a lot of gun owners, whether they're, in the city or in the country. But when you get toward liberals, they definitely are anti-gun. They're like, oh, you don't need a gun.
And you look at those cities, though, where they have the strictest gun laws and they have the most gun crimes.
Yeah, I mean, they've tried to restrict guns, and there are arguments by the liberals that, well, those guns are coming in from out of the city. Well, guess what? If you outlaw guns in the country, they're going to come in from across the border, just like everything else. Guess what? We're not protecting the border. We have a border that's had 2.7 million people, 2.7 million encounters in 2022, 2.8 million encounters in 2023. That's 5.5 million. And we're not even done with 2023. We're on pace for 5 million encounters by the Border Patrol with illegal immigrants. And if you watch video, I don't know how liberals are ignoring this. There are plenty of videos of immigrants flooding across, like literally in droves. Yeah. I'm sure you see it. We were talking about TikTok on the last show. What do you see on TikTok regarding the illegal immigrants?
I mean, I've seen videos of them crossing the border, literally just walking past construction workers who are supposed to be there helping to build the wall, and they're just walking right past them. No one's stopping them. No one's asking them any questions. There's no kind of actual border defense there. There's just families trying to walk across.
And let's say this, people are in denial about what a border wall does. If they're in denial, why is Biden now calling for the border wall? It's been racist since Trump said it in 2015, and all of a sudden in 2023, Democrats are on board and it's no longer racist?
Yep. It's ridiculous. It's a hypocrisy.
Did you see that about Biden?
I did see that about Biden. He's restarted the border wall from where Trump left it off.
Yeah, and that was the other thing. They didn't acknowledge that Trump had completed any of the border wall. Like when Trump came out of office, so like he didn't do anything on the border wall. The other day I was looking at a liberal outlet, whether it was MSNBC or CNN, because I read everything. I try to scan across because I want to know what everybody's saying. All of a sudden they go, Biden wants to add to the 450 miles of wall that Trump built. I'm like, I thought you guys said he didn't build anything. Like they contradict themselves.
Yep, they do it all the time.
So people want to say, let's discuss this border wall thing a little more. We've lived in San Diego most of your life.
Yep.
How hard is it to get into Mexico without going through a border wall? We have to drive through the border wall, right? We have to cross the border.
There's no other way, really.
And even when we go into Mexico, guess what happens as soon as we get over there? They pull you over. They check and see why you're there, how long you're going to be there. If you walk across, they ask you, why are you there? How long are you going to be there? So they check all of that out. Here are some statistics for you. In 1992, there were 500,000 people illegally crossing, I think it was per year. And in 2020, they were down to, before the pandemic and all the other crap hit, this is even 2019, I think, they were down to 25,000 from 500,000. You're looking at an improvement of 95%.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people will ignore that study. And say, oh, well, border walls don't work. Now all of a sudden they're demanding a border wall, so clearly they do work. We've spent $60 billion on protecting Ukraine's border, but we couldn't spend. Trump was only asking for $5 billion at the time. Do you remember that?
Yep.
He was only asking for $5 billion to complete his wall, and even if it took 10 or 20 billion, we should defend our border at the very least. And now look at what you have. You have 5.5 million that have come across in the last 2 years alone. That's not counting the 11 million that were already here. So you're looking at 15 million people that have crossed the border illegally, that are here illegally.
And the other thing that most left-wing medias don't cover is the fact that a lot of those end up being unaccompanied minors who are here with someone who's trafficking them. If you watch the movie The Sound of Freedom, you get to really see how easy it is for someone to basically get a kid across the border. From Guatemala, from Honduras, from any of those Latin American countries, they tell them, hey, we're going to go ahead and do an audition with your kid. Looks like they have some really good potential. Take them to the audition. Oh, sorry, Dad, you can't come in and watch. You have to stay outside, pick them up at 7:30 later tonight. Dad gets there, kids are gone. Where's the kid? On a boat going to Mexico, TJ, going to a port up there so that they can be bought. And you see that movie, and it really makes you understand why the need for a border wall is necessary.
So you mentioned Sound of Freedom. That was silenced as well, right? Like they were, it's not just mainstream media. It's also, go ahead. Who was trying to silence that?
Mainstream media, different influencers and stuff. People on the left, they didn't want to watch it because it was quote unquote a Christian movie. But it's not the fact that it's a Christian movie. It's the fact that it's showing exactly what's happening across our border and what's happening at the borders. They tried to tie one of the backers to as an accessory to kidnapping, child kidnapping, of course. And the judge, when they got the documents basically saying that he's being charged as an accessory, the judge asked the DA, well, who's being charged with the kidnapping?
Oh, real quick, spoiler alert for anybody watching. All right, go ahead.
But no, so this isn't part of the movie. This is after the movie. This has nothing to do with the movie. It's a backer that's being charged as an accessory to kidnapping, and he's being charged. The judge gets the paperwork and asks the DA, well, who's being charged with the kidnapping? They don't have anyone they're charging with the kidnapping, but they're charging this guy, falsely accusing him of being an accessory to kidnapping.
Well, and to that effect, I mean, the sex trade and sex trafficking is happening in abundance. You look at Jeffrey Epstein, and whether he killed himself or not, I don't care who killed him. The fact is he's gone. I looked, and I read history all the time. I read Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller. His son, John D. Rockefeller II, was put on a grand jury to investigate sex trafficking. It was called the white sex trade in New York. And so he was put on as the head of the grand jury because they thought, oh, this is some rich kid. He's not even going to care about actually investigating. He cared. Like, he knew that his dad did the oil stuff well. John D. Rockefeller wanted to do charitable and humanitarian things well. He investigated and wound up, they arrested several people shutting down a big sex trade ring in New York City back then. My point of contention here, or my point here is, there's been this elite sex trafficking stuff happening. It's not just with Jeffrey Epstein. It was happening before him, and I'm sure
It's still happening.
I'm sure this is almost once someone gets found out, they're out as the head of that, and they replace him with someone else. I mean, sex trafficking is still happening with immigrants coming across the border, and it's still happening with girls being kidnapped here and whatever else, you know? So it's I don't understand why liberal media avoids the topic so much. That's really what I'm trying to say. I don't understand why they wanted to shut down Sound of Freedom as much as they did.
No, and that's what the accusation. So with the accusation, a lot of medias was like, oh, this is the guy that's backing the Sound of Freedom. He's a child kidnapper. He's a child sex trafficker. Da 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 da. They were trying to push that, but it was all false.
Well, that, and I think it wasn't the guy. It was one of the investors, right?
It was an investor. It wasn't an actor. It wasn't anything. It was a guy that
wasn't a producer?
donated money.
Yeah. It was just a guy that gave some money to fund a movie. He probably didn't even know what the movie was about when he funded. Who knows? But in either case, you're right. It was, why would you want to shut down a message of let's shut down sex trafficking? I don't understand that. That to me is mind-boggling.
And it comes back to like the Jeffrey Epstein. I'm sorry, we had his black book for fucking 5 years and nobody got investigated. None of the people who were on that plane got questioned or interviewed.
Well, and then the one guy that did, Prince Philip, all of a sudden that case goes away. And then you have Ghislaine Maxwell that's found guilty of her involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and for grooming children and getting children and shit like that. How is she guilty if there are no perpetrators that she supposedly gave the children to? Was she getting these girls for nobody?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a whole list of that. And if we're able to track all the Twitter files and everything else that you see going on and stuff like that, how can they not look back at her communications and find that? I'm sure they've got the book somewhere, and it's someone shutting it down. So my theory is that someone has replaced Jeffrey Epstein in that chain of command. It's still happening. It hasn't stopped. And I think that it's a controversial theory, but it's one all the same. And I can't see them shutting it down when the clients were already there. Mm-hmm. They just found somebody else to lead the ring. Yep. So Sound of Freedom, to your point, whether it's illegal immigrants coming across the border, whether it's girls being recruited to go to these elite people and pedophile island or whatever, that should be something we can all agree on. And we talk about agreeing on things across the aisle. That should be no problem. It should be a no-brainer for everybody to go, let's shut down child sex trafficking. Let's attack that. So why isn't Congress attacking that? Why isn't some prosecuting attorney like Letitia James in New York, where this shit happens? Why is she not pursuing that? Why is she so focused on Trump and guesstimating what the value of his worth was when the banks were all fine with giving him a loan? Like, that's a bullshit thing to distract yourself with.
And there's some kind of line in the loan process where the bank has to do their due diligence on how much their assets are actually worth, right?
Yeah. So basically, when you're doing loan contracts, whether it's for a house, a building, or whatever, there is a disclaimer in there that says, "Hey, do your own homework. Here's what I say it's worth, but you have to go do your homework as well." That was in every contract that Trump put forth. And here's the other thing. J.P. Morgan, I read 150 Years of Morgan. J.P. Morgan said, I don't just loan money based on what someone has. I loan money based on character, based on reputation. So when you look at a loan, it's not given, like, you can't just get, he said, just because you have money, it doesn't mean I'm going to give you a loan if I don't like your character. Yeah. That's what he was saying. Banks are the same way too. I mean, they know what Trump's worth was. They know what his reputation was. He gave so much to New York. This is what boggles my mind. He gave buildings, he gave parks, he developed areas, he gave jobs, he gave tax money for decades. They never had any problem with the amount of business he did. But all of a sudden, he's president, and then he's no longer president, and now they have a problem with what he did. They're like, oh, well, these loans were fraudulent.
And for the judge to say that his place at Mar-a-Lago is only worth, what was it, $40 million?
He said $18 million.
$18 million is what he said. I mean, you're looking at the places around there, and for an acre of land, it's $40 million. And Mar-a-Lago is 20 acres large.
Yeah, I mean, it's, from what I understand, it's about 100 times larger. And even if, let's say 100 times is overblown, let's go with 80 times larger. 80 times 40 is still what, $3.2 billion or something like that. So they're biased and they're leveraging and using comps and things like that. But the reality is, even if, let's say you own a house or whatever, and you decide you want to sell it in San Diego for $1.5 million, and it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment in a terrible part of town. You can say that it's worth that, and you can put it up on the market all day long for $1.5 million. But if nobody wants to buy it, then it's not worth that. And so it's a very arbitrary number that people that are negotiating have to come to an agreement on. And these banks have some of the most advanced lawyers. I mean, he wasn't dealing with like a little local bank. He's dealing with a bank that's loaning him $1 billion or a $500 million. So these banks have their army of attorneys that are evaluating these contracts. And he made all of his payments on time. That he didn't skip interest payments, and he paid off the loans. So where is the crime? I mean, if you're calling it fraudulent, then show me the victim, because no bank has pressed charges against him.
Yep.
And if anybody is frauded, it would be the banks. It's not the citizens in New York. There's an unlimited amount of money to give. You just have to qualify for it. So.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, that kind of brings us over to the interest rates being as high as they are now. It's ridiculous. I'm saying, you know, I work in car sales, so I see interest rates a lot. I've seen customers that come in and they qualify for a 25% interest rate on a $10,000 loan. And it's ridiculous. I mean, even at base, I mean, tier 1, you're still getting about 8% interest rate if you're like 800 credit score.
Did you say a 25% interest rate?
Yeah, for some people.
And don't say anybody in particular, but 25. You've seen 25% on a loan. Mm-hmm. Do you know what that amounts to? If you're doing $10,000, that's $2,500 a year in interest. You're looking at $250 a month. 250, that's 25. About $200 a month in interest alone. That's not including your principal payment and all that other stuff to try to get that thing down. That's for a $10,000 loan. Now imagine you have a $30,000 car.
Yep.
That means that your interest per month on that is now, what is that? 30,000 times 25. You're looking at 1/4 of that. So about $7,500 a year that you're paying in interest. Like, this stuff is insane. And so the Fed wants to say, hey, we're trying to tamp down inflation. Well, you know what would have done a great job at tamping down inflation? Not putting out $10 trillion in packages, not spending more than we have, not continuing to fund Ukraine with all this money that we don't have and pulling it out of thin air. So
Biden might not have raised taxes, but he sure as hell raised the interest rates.
Yeah, he's like, oh, nobody under 400,000 is going to have their taxes raised. Well, interest rate is a form of tax, because who needs loans? It's not the wealthy. I mean, don't get me wrong, the wealthy may take out a loan, but they're paying 8%, 6%. So if they take out a loan and they're paying 6 to 8%, a person with bad credit, the poor, the lower middle class, like you said, they're paying 20 to 25% interest. That's stupid that they have to pay that much to take out a loan. Now, I understand that it's to discourage people from taking out loans. But when you need a car to get to work and your interest rate is 25% just to get to work, like, that stuff baffles me.
Just to make money to live.
Yeah. And that doesn't include the cost of living in California or any of these big cities. So whether it's LA or whatever. So you're right to the point about the interest rate. I mean, Biden ran on, no new taxes. He might as well have been George Bush, because that was George W. Bush, not the second Bush, the first Bush. No new taxes. And then he gets in office. He's like, except for these. And so Biden's doing the same thing, except I think that taxes would have been cheaper than raising the interest rate. And let's be real, the reason that they have to do some of this is to tamp down inflation, but they raised rates so fast that they started causing banks to collapse. I think there are still some financial ramifications to come that have not been fully vetted yet because of these interest rate raises. I know that banks had to be doing risky stuff. I mean, the ones that have collapsed already were doing risky stuff, but then you have the crypto bank, the FTW or whatever it was, with Sam.
Oh, FTX.
FTX, there we go. And that collapsed. I mean, they weren't the only ones doing risky. Crypto wasn't the only people doing risky stuff. You have these bankers, investment banking and things like that are doing risky stuff too. And guess what happens? An investment bank will get bailed out. Guess who doesn't get bailed out? The poor and middle class, man. And my heart goes out to them time and again, because I have a lot of family members that are poor and middle class. I'm middle class myself, and I mean, I look at what I have to cut back on, and then I look at the cost of living expenses adjusting north. I mean, it's a tough balance, but let's say this about the interest rate. People want to say, well, Biden doesn't have any impact on the interest rate. He absolutely does. And the reason he does is when Trump took office, the Fed chairman tried raising rates then. Trump bullied him into not raising the interest rates. He said, the hell you are. You're going to lower the interest rates and help the people. Trump was really about trying to help the people. And I think people in Congress and people in government got upset that he was so hell-bent on helping the normal person that they started this propaganda war, starting with Russia collusion, going to Ukrainian phone call, going to January 6th, where he said very clearly, we're going to peacefully and patriotically march down to the White House because we are the party of law.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
And I have that on my Instagram for people that want to dispute that. But he absolutely said patriotically and peacefully march down. And now they're charging him with stuff. So I think that those in power got upset that he was given the power to the people.
Yep. The people in power don't want to give up their power.
They don't want to give up their power. They don't want to give up their wealth. Look at Pelosi. I mean, like you said, she's worth however much at this point, over 100 million.
Mil.
And so, and her husband, I know I've heard about Paul Pelosi making these wagers on options. Options are risky. And he's sitting here making $1.5 million on a freaking options wager. That's not because he didn't have insider information. He knew what was happening. He knew what policies Nancy was. You think she didn't go home and talk to him about the policies she's working on, whether it's with Tesla or whomever else?
Yeah.
So, to your point on our last episode, that kind of stuff needs to be tamped down. And Trump came along and upset that whole political spectrum, and now they're out to get him in every way possible. How else do you say 91 charges on 4 indictments for 700 years? Like, at what point do you admit that he's being railroaded?
Yeah. No, it's ridiculous.
So, I mean, liberals used to talk about the justice system being weaponized against certain populations and things like that. They're like, oh, we need to fix this. We need to fix that. And now it's happening. They've gotten so bold about doing it that they do it right in front of your face.
Yeah, they do it right in front of your face, and you don't even say anything about it because you're on the opposite side. You're with them. You see it as, oh, finally, they're doing the right thing. No, they're not. They're doing the exact thing that you were complaining about beforehand.
Yeah. And Trump has what? He has the Mar-a-Lago case. He has the Georgia case. The Georgia case, people keep going, oh, well, he asked them for 11,000 votes. He asked to find 11,000. He didn't say create 11,000. Those are two big differences. He didn't say, hey, let's manufacture 11,000 votes. That's what Biden did.
One night.
I know, right? Stop 6 elections in 6 states while the other 44 are able to get their stuff done.
Yeah, and then having a third, what was it, a 40,000 vote jump in 1 hour where it was just all Biden, no Trump votes.
Yeah, so it was, here's my thing. Whether he legitimately won or not, he has every right to challenge an election. He has every right to call someone and say, hey, can you do a vote count again? That's all he was asking for. Hey, if there are 11,000 votes out there, find them. He didn't say, oh, give me 11,000 votes. He said, find me 11,000 votes, 11,000 legitimate votes.
We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated.
That's all on context. You can't prosecute someone based on the context of that had no fraudulent election request.
Yep.
It's, hey, go out there, count these votes. They're out there. You know they're out there. I think he even said that during the call. You know they're out there. Go find them. And so do you have the Georgia thing? You have the Mar-a-Lago thing with the documents. It's funny because the very documents that they accused Trump of having, Biden had from his vice presidency. He did not have presidential privilege. They never went after those documents for 7 years, but Trump only has them for 2 years, and all of a sudden they're at his front door with a search warrant?
Yep.
Like, I'm sorry, but Biden had them in his garage, unsecured. So
we go back to the hypocrisy of that. Just the, one side treating, President Biden with, all honors. Oh, he left them in his garage. He left them at his house at, Penn State. But, Trump, he just finished up his presidency, and he had some in Mar-a-Lago at his residency there. So we're going to have to indict him on that.
Making excuses, man. And it's mind-boggling how many excuses they make for someone to do that. So you have Mar-a-Lago, you have Georgia, you have the New York thing with Letitia James, which is very subjective in terms of valuing his property. What's the fourth case, the fourth one I'm missing? January 6th? I already mentioned that one. Yeah. The peacefully and patriotically, the one that, what's his name? James. Who's the prosecutor for that? Do you remember his name?
I don't remember the name off the top of my head.
I can't think of it either. Anyway, We are wrapping up episode 2 of The Christopher Show. We thank you very much for tuning in this week. I'm C1.
I'm C2.
And this was The Christopher Show. Thank you. It's the Merchant Card Group. If your business needs payment processing services, hit me up and I'll give you a referral code. With my referral code, send them your invoice, and if they can't beat your current cost, they will give you $500. That's how confident they are they can beat your cost. That offer is good this month only, so hit them up now. It expires October 31st, 2023. You can reach me at CA Glennon on Instagram in the description below. Algo Factory empowers you to build your own custom algorithmic trading plan that fits your personality, your schedule, and your needs. I've done crypto trading, day trading, and long-term investments. These guys are here to help you succeed. No computer programming knowledge is necessary. It works in all asset classes. The link is in the description below, www.algofactory.tech. Click on it below.